What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about wheels, lift, and tires on my 2003 Mitsubishi Montero. Something that I get a ton of questions about. A lot of people want to know, what have I done for wheels, lift, and tires? And there's a lot of things that I'm going to share in this video that I've gone through, things that I've experimented with that'll hopefully help you guys if you're looking to lift one of these. There's one more thing I want to mention before I get into it. I'm based here in the United States of America. I'm in Montana. And because of that, I'm pretty limited in the amount of options I can have in the aftermarket. Some of you guys in Australia, some of you guys over in the Middle East, you have different options that I don't have access to, or it'd be very expensive or very hard to get those. And so I'm working with what I have here in the United States. And so that's what I'm going to share about. So let's start, first of all, just talking about the wheels and the tires, the simple part of the equation. So I'm over here, I'm rocking BFG KO2s. In a 285/75/16 size. That's going to be 32.8 inches by 11.2 inches wide. And so it's a 33. This is the most common size for a 16 and a 33. And they're also the E-rated tires. So they're meant for heavy load. They've got a 3-ply sidewall. And these have been really good for me. This is actually my second set of them. And there's a couple reasons I went with the KO2s. The biggest one is I do a lot of road miles with this car, whether it be road trips with my wife or getting to the trail or the destination. I do about 20,000 miles a year with this rig. And so I need something, a tire that's going to be quiet on the highway. It's going to be long lasting. It's going to be smooth, more than I need something that's going to be aggressive in the mud. And so a lot of guys love these. Some guys are real haters. I think they're awesome. I have not found them to be an issue for grip, except for when I'm in really deep snow, which nothing really grips great in snow. And then I don't deal with a lot of mud, and so I don't have to worry about that. So these only have a couple thousand miles on them, 2,000 miles on them. They're relatively new. I really like these. I've beat the tar out of them off-road, and they have stuck with me. And so I'm a BFG KO2 believer. And so again, those are in a 33 size. The wheels, which are dirty, of course, they're always dirty. These are Eagle Alloy Baja 8 design wheels. And so like they're discontinued, but they've got the Baja 8 classic look to them. These are a 16-inch rim, and the reason I went with 16 is it's as small as I can get. You can do a 15, I've heard, but it's pretty small, and so it allows for more tire, but it also clears the brakes. This is the stock size, so that's helpful as well. So these are 16 inches in diameter by 8 inches wide, and then they are a -11 offset. And so what that means basically is they're going to stick out quite a bit further than normal. Now, if you're rocking an 8.5-inch zero offset, which is a very common size, it's going to be relatively the same. It might poke out maybe a 1/2 inch more. So if you look down the side here, my wheels are pretty much flush, just a little bit past the body line of the car. And I did that intentionally. One of the things that I really wanted to do is I wanted my wheels and then my sliders to hit something on the trail first instead of my body. I didn't want them inset. The other thing is the Gen 3 is notorious for feeling really tippy. The stock wheel is going to be 3 whole inches more narrow. So you figure you're like right here for the edge of the tire, 3 inches more narrow than my current setup. And so this adds a lot of stability. It adds a lot of, a lot more track width on the trail. And I think it feels great. It's good for protection, and it looks really good too. It's pretty wide. I don't know if I'd go a whole lot wider than this, but it does work well for my setup. So that's in the front. And then if you come around to the rear, you can see same story, pretty much flush with the body lines. It pokes just a little. And that leads me to my next point before we talk about lift, which is going to be my fenders. I get asked about this all the time. One of the things that people see when they see these fenders is they say, wow, I've never seen a Montero with oversized fenders. And these aren't oversized fenders. These are stock, but with the wheel and tire package, they tend to look more muscular. They tend to look a lot bigger. I think they look sweet. It's a really good design piece for me. But when I was running this wheel with this tire, like I said, this is 3 inches wider than it's supposed to be. I was running into all sorts of clearancing issues with this fender. And so I'm gonna try to do my best to explain this, but if you haven't looked at your stock fender, you're gonna have a hard time understanding what I'm talking about. So right here, you can see I've cut back a lot of material back in there. And so there used to be a flap that came up basically to here. I've cut that back out. And I've also cut this part right here. It's hard to see that, but that's gonna be your inner fender liner. And so that's usually made of steel. It's gonna be part of the actual like fender body. And then I've cut this plastic piece back as well. And so there's been a lot of chopping and a lot of cutting. It used to come in about 1 inch more. And what would happen is when I'd go and I'd get really excited and I'd go run around in the sand dunes, what would happen is my wheel would come up and it would smash this fender. And so this fender it has been tweaked and it's been moved around, and this part's popped off and a lot of other stuff. And I've had parts of my plastic fender on my tire, all that. And so basically what I did is I cleared all of that as much as I could so that this tire can tuck up. And right now, if the only time I hit it is if I actually get airborne in the front and come down full compression, fully loaded at high speeds, I'll get a little bit of rubbing, but it's not nearly as bad. I don't get a crunching sound or anything like that. So that's what I did here in the front. In the back, I did a little bit of clearancing, just a little bit, mostly right back there to make a little bit of room. But the other thing I did is I threw in bump stops. These are just, you can see them right there, the red ones. These are just some Amazon special ones. I just found ones that were tall. And so these are maybe a 1/2 inch taller in the front. And that's really helped. And then this will be harder to see, but, oh, I don't know if I can get it up there. I've extended, there's the bump stop. I've extended that bump stop by a 1/2 inch as well. I made a spacer to go on it that goes underneath the factory bump stop and pushes it up a 1/2 inch. So that's how I got rid of my rubbing issues. Like I said, if I jump it, I still have some issues, but if I'm not jumping it, I'm pretty good. So there's a few other things with this. Given that this car weighs so much, when you start putting weight on it, any amount of lift you put on it, if you add weight, you sink it back down. And so I've got a couple different things I've done with lift, but on all of them, I've gone back through and rearranged it based on how much weight I have. And so now that I've got it all fully loaded up and kind of built like I like it, I've added some stuff. So let's start here in the back. The back is the more simple part of it. If you get under here, you can see I've got Old Man Emu springs, OME springs, with Bilstein shocks. And so these are the HD springs. These are the most heavy duty springs that they have. And then on top of that, I have a 1 inch spring spacer. It's made of rubber, so it's gonna be a little softer, but that's how I got the lift that I needed there. And so HD springs, Bilstein shocks. As you can kind of see here, this is not dramatically affected by CV angles. They're well within operating range. It has affected my alignment back here a little bit, but I will make another video talking about that because that's a whole nother subject. But that's what I got going on in the back is Old Man Emu HD springs with Bilstein shocks. Now in the front, I have the same combination as far as brands, but a lot different as far as how I've got them set up. So these are gonna be Bilsteins again with Old Man Emu springs, but these are the medium duty springs. So these are not the HD springs. A lot of guys do HD springs if they're gonna run a big heavy bumper. My bumper only weighs 40 or 50 pounds, so I didn't go for that. But these are gonna be the medium duty springs, and they're gonna be on the second setting of the Bilsteins. So these Bilsteins are adjustable, but they're not adjustable like some of your coilovers or some of the stuff you see in the aftermarket car world. They're gonna be adjustable by this little clip right here. So you can kind of see this groove, and without being able to pull the whole thing apart, it's hard to explain, but this groove allows for a circlip to sit either here, or I've got on the higher setting, and that moves it up about 10 millimeters. And so what that does is it compresses the spring a little bit before, it adds some preload, so that it's gonna sit up a little higher, it's gonna have a little more lift to it, and so that's what I've done here in the front. So these are medium duty springs, bumped up to the second setting on my Bilstein shocks. Now, I really like this setup. I have never run a different setup other than some spacers and some stock stuff. I do not recommend spacers for the front here if you're trying to get real lift. If you're trying to just bump it up just a little bit, maybe a 1/2 inch, maybe 1 inch, you can do that with some strut spacers that go on top of your strut tower. But if you're trying to do anything more than that, I recommend going with an actual lift. So I really like this combination. I think the medium duty in the front allows for a little more comfort, and the HD in the rear allows for a lot more capability of, I can load this all the way up, and maybe fully loaded, I'll squat maybe a 1/2 inch, which isn't bad considering how much stuff I carry around and how much gear we have and all that. But the one thing that is frustrating to me is, so I've got that bumped up to the second setting on the front, and I've got that 1 inch puck in the back. I didn't have that before, and I would do a lot of wheeling trips and I'd get out and it was great, but I'd find that I'd hit my front skid plate more often than I liked. It was very common, almost every trail, I'd bump it at least once. And adding just a little bit in the front, about an inch in the front and rear, has made it so I very rarely, unless I do something really crazy or screw something up, hit my front skid plate. It's moved me up to about 13 inches of ground clearance to the front skid, which is quite a bit for your average stuff. Obviously, I'm not like climbing over any crazy boulders with that, but that keeps me out of the woods for a lot of stuff. So I really like that setup. It's been good for me. The other thing is, it has sacrificed some comfort. And so if I'm still aired up, I'm at 40 PSI, that's what I run in these tires. If I'm still aired up, it definitely affects the comfort. It's harsher. It's something you kind of get used to, but when I air these down to 20 PSI, 17 PSI, then it's really comfortable and really responsive. So there you go, guys. There's my wheels, lift, and tires. Hopefully I covered all the bases. If you guys have any other questions or things you want me to address, put them down in the comments below. I'm gonna start putting out more of these videos now that we're getting into the wheeling season. I'm gonna be out. We're gonna talk about camping. We're gonna talk about my roof rack. We're gonna talk about the secondary battery system and all that. But I'd love to hear what you guys think of the wheels and tires. So let me know if you have any other questions.